Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to welcome everybody to the GlassIG webinar series. Topic today is going to be active policy enforcement on SharePoint and shared drives. And just a little quick housekeeping, couple things. One, today's webinar is going to be recorded, so afterwards you should be able to get it up on the GlassIG website under the resource tab, along with our other webinars and recordings and documentation we have up there, so feel free to visit that location. Next piece, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and what I'll do is probably 15-20 minutes from now, right before the demo, I'll pause, I'll answer whatever questions I can. After the demo, I'll also do some questions and answers, and anything I can't get to today, I will make sure that I follow up and get back to that individual. So with that said, let's kick off the webinar. Let's kick off today's session. And again, active policy enforcement on SharePoint and shared drives. So to start off a little bit, let me tell you about myself briefly. I've been with GlassIG about 4 years now, working on the GlassIG, the Glass solution itself, implementations of the product itself. Prior to that, I was about 5 years at a software company, business intelligence analytics, with implementation on that product. And prior to that, about 20 years experience at a couple of software companies with the ECM document management side of the world. So that's a little bit about myself and my knowledge of the world. Now GlassIG, right? So a little overview of the company itself, GlassIG. Glass has probably about, Glass itself has been around about 8 years with information governance solutions being deployed around the world. We have headquarters in Geneva. Our headquarters today is in Geneva, Switzerland. We have sales operations in the US, in Europe, and we have partners around the world that resell and provide services for our solution. Our customers are in a number of different verticals. Their solutions have been implemented both in cloud-based solutions and on-prem environments. Did I just lose everybody? Okay, sounds back. Sorry about that. As I was saying, I just got a bleep on my screen. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, our customers, a number of different verticals across the industries. And we've been deployed both, as I said, cloud-based and on-prem deployments. Our research and development teams are located in Switzerland and Slovakia. So that's a little bit about GlassIG. Now into the agenda for today, the topics we're going to cover. So the first part, we're really going to go into information governance and how it's deployed for SharePoint and shared drives and how it works. So I'll go into a little detail about the environment itself, how we deploy it, how it works on the system, and I'll show you a little brief demo of the solution and show you how quickly the system can be deployed and content added to it. So one of the big things we stress, and you'll go through this as we go through the presentation, you'll hear me reinforce this thing about the policies and this the concept of information governance. Well, for us, the elements of information governance are very key. Information governance means using policies that you define to govern the management of information in your organization, ensuring compliance, minimizing cost, mitigating risk, and maximizing the value of your information assets. And what that means, what that statement really means to us, is that single policy, that ability to take a single policy, build it out with the lifecycle requirements for it, any descriptions for it, associated documents, citations that might go through it, and everything associated with that that one retention schedule, that one policy itself, and apply it against what needs to be governed, right? So how do I govern that information, that single policy that's been put in place? How do I govern the SharePoint and shared drive and SharePoint Online and the FileNet systems, right? All those multiple repositories sitting out there, and then to access that information that's sitting in those different repositories. And that cycle of taking that single policy, applying against different governance, different repositories, right, governing that content, and making sure that that information now is captured. So I've identified it, whether it's metadata or other fields within the environment, and policies are applied against it, so now I can manage it. Now, with that said, we'll go a little bit about how GlassIG policy management really works, right? What's the structure behind this? So the first piece of it, and the strength of it, is that single view, that single tree structure, the ability to have that single parent category and drill down into multiple policies underneath that. So you can basically organize your policies, organize how you can access and look at information. Descriptions, not just the ability to have a basic blanket policy out there, but now to make sure they're described. This is a clear description that users can understand and records managers can understand. Maybe associated documents or file types that are with that you can tie to that policy. Any of the lifecycle information, whether it's not just date-based, but trigger-based, event-based information. Any laws and citations with that. And the most important part of it is that's legally defensible, that we know the time from the time it is cataloged on the system, that nobody can touch it, can't be moved or modified, and if it gets disposed of, when it's disposed of, and once it's truly disposed of off the system. A very important piece. With all that information, we report on that business matrix, right, all those analytics. So all the information that's generated within the system, we analyze and allow you to have a business view into that content. And if we have time, I'll show you a little bit at the end of the demo. But it's that reporting back. It's understanding all the statistics that are there. And then really that last piece of it, and probably the most important for some organizations, is sharing those policies throughout the organization. So not just the policies are built out for records managers to use and apply against repositories, but now end users have the ability to go out and access easily a policy, view it, and understand what content's sitting out there. So we'll start with shared drives themselves, right? What does it look like when GlassIG governs content within a shared drive? So we look at it as really two different ways to go out and get the information, right? For us, the first one is that native approach. We call it the native approach to Glass. It's the GlassIG cataloger. It allows you to scan a folder, index content, and extract those system attributes so I can classify a particular set of information to a particular policy, right? That's one particular way of doing it. The other way to go out and really get that information is to use a file analysis tool. And some of the companies we work with, some of our partners are companies like Nuix or ActiveNav or Xtero or any number of e-discovery type tools that allow us to go out, scan folders, same thing, index the content, but that added layer they provide is really to do that rot removal, right? That redundant, delete redundant, obsolete information, trivial content that's sitting out in the system, and clean up the environment before you even get into the process of cataloging into the system. The other component that an e-discovery tool brings to the table is the ability to extract metadata within the content itself. So not the metadata tied to it, but actually data within the content and pull that out and use it for governing purposes and searching purposes. So I have the multiple ways of now getting the information. Now what do we do with the information? So what Glass does is that information, this catalog information is passed to Glass, and Glass will assign a policy to it. So policies are assigned to catalog or declare the information based on the rules and regulations that you set up, based on how we access it, how we should go against it. That policy now has lifecycle information, right? That the information gets triggered based on any number of terms, and that triggering can include the disposal of it. As I said before, maybe migration to a long-term storage, or maybe from a on-premise solution storage to maybe a cloud-based vault, for long-term storage, or just archiving off the system itself. So you have a number of different mechanisms with the advanced lifecycle functionality we provide. And then the last part, which in some cases really the most important of it, is now how do I apply legal hold. So we have the ability to apply legal hold against all that content that you've identified. So everything you've cataloged or declared to a system, now we can go out and put a legal hold on it to lock it up. So for any cases you might have, and you have multiple legal holds to get the same content. So next step, right, the next part of this as we go along is now the SharePoint side of the world, right? So how does GlassIG govern content within SharePoint itself? And again, there's really, we look at things as two different ways. How do we get the information, and what do we do with the information? So the first one is how do we get it? And SharePoint, there's really three different ways, common ways that we go against it. One, and the one I'm going to show, is really the machine automated processing, where we build a cataloger out for GlassIG, cataloger for SharePoint. In our cases today, we'll use SharePoint 2010, and that allows you then to go out, identify the content, and apply that policy that you've defined against it. Excuse me. The other way we have it, another way is we actually have GlassIG has a wizard. Excuse me. GlassIG has a wizard, and the wizard allows the user to manually declare content. So they can go out there and basically under SharePoint right-click and select some content and declare it based on whatever policy they want to apply against that particular content. So it allows them to one-off the process a little bit if you want to give that ability to the end user. And then really the last part, and a pretty common one, is the ability to do basically a semi-automatic approach. And what that does is based on the views within SharePoint, you can set up views that we can now go against and apply policies against those particular views within SharePoint and schedule those jobs, run those jobs, and basically it'll do the same thing. It'll take that content that we've identified based on the SharePoint view and apply a policy to it. So now we've looked at the three ways of accessing content, right? To basically how do I get that information, and now what does Glass do with it? Well, it's really the same for all three of them. We assign a policy, same thing as we discussed with the shared drives. We put whatever regulations, so it complies with regulations. Any lifecycle information associated with that is now triggered, whether it's date-based or event-based. And once the clock starts on it, whether it's date-based, based on the clock that's been captured or whatever fields, that now is part of the system. And then the last part, as we discussed, was the ability to put legal hold. So really, from our viewpoint, the two repositories I'm going against today, shared drives and SharePoint 2010, we look at the world as get the information, how do we get it? So that means how do we, whether it's native to us or we use an external tool within the repository we're going against, and then what do we do with the information once we get it? So now what I want to do, excuse me, is go more of a global solution view, right? What does this world look like, and how do I keep bringing up this single policy? What does it really mean? So with a single policy, right? So I'm going back to this single policy. So I build out a policy. It has a particular set of rules for it, has a life cycle for something, and we'll just use a contract, for example. So I have contracts, they sit out there for 6 years, and after 6 years, they get disposed of. Well, this is the view of the world, and how it looks to us is, and this is about really from our native viewpoint, using our native cataloger, it is policies built out, that single policy is built, and now I can go against multiple catalogers. So in this case, I have SharePoint Online. I use the catalog there based on the rules that have been defined in the cataloger. I can go identify any content on SharePoint Online, process that content within the GlassIG system. And the same thing with SharePoint Server, right? So SharePoint itself, SharePoint 2010 that I'll be using today, same concept. I go out, big picture, I find that cataloger to go against the SharePoint 2010 server. I've identified based on the cataloger what content they go against, and I'll show you. identify the policy to use, that single policy for contracts, and it'll now process that. And the same thing with shared drives. Same concept, single policy, I build the cataloger out, and I can go against any files that are on the system. Question, okay, actually I'll get to that in a second. So really the next part of this, what I want to cover is the demo itself, right? So that first demo itself is, I'll cover a couple of different things. One, I'll walk through just the policy view itself, what the policy looks like, and how to navigate through the policies themselves. I'll show a little bit about SharePoint, the view into SharePoint, and then really the shared drive itself and how to access SharePoint and shared drives, how we go against that. So before I get into the questions, I just wanted to remind everybody, right? So starting, as soon as we're done with the webinar, you can actually go on the system itself, the GlassIG system itself, and you can set up your own account, a free account. It'll give you Policy Manager. It allows you to, from that point, go out, connect to Box or to Google Drive, and do the same thing I'm going to show you today for those two repositories. So you'll be able to add policies to it, set up your life cycle, retention schedules for it, whatever you want, add them to the system, and it is your system to use. There's no charge on it. It is a freemium version of it. It allows you to go out there and test it out, sort of a proof of concept, and then share those policies within your company. So if you have questions about that, you can always follow up with myself or somebody else at GlassIG, and we'd be more than willing to help you with that. So there are two questions. First one was about, yes, so it was about dashboards in general. I did say I'm gonna show at the end of it. I'll show really just an inventory dashboard, so it'll give you a little view into the world I'm looking at. So we're gonna do some things with SharePoint and shared drives. So I'll show you a little statistics about that. And next one about retention. The second question was about how do I enter retention? Well, retention schedules can be put into the system a couple different ways. So real briefly, one, you can enter them yourselves. So you can actually enter them in the system. We also have a whole assessment, basically a services team, and part of the assessment is that we'll go out and not only look at your retention schedule, but then also go out there and help you import it in it, modify and import it into the GlassIG policy management solution itself. So, and we can help you. Again, if you have questions on that or something, please feel free to just follow up with us. So let's see if I can't use technology. So a couple of things I want to show you as I go into the demo, right? So we'll just start off with the shared drive. I'm going to go into the solution in a second, but I just want to point out two things. This is just the shared drive I'm going to go against. You can see just a couple of Word documents sitting out there. And SharePoint itself, it's 2010. It's probably like everybody else has seen before. And I'm just going to go in the 2016 folder, and you can see here that just files sitting out there that I added a little while ago to the system. So with that said, I don't see any more questions, so I will start with the demo itself. So first with the demo, we authenticated into the system. I've authenticated in already. It's basically you set up how you want to authenticate. I can, from this screen, once I authenticate into the system, I start with my home page, right? This is my primary screen, and from a records manager standpoint, I can do a couple of different things here. First, it tells me a story of what's going on with my day, right? So first simple thing is I have 58 policies that are defined to the system. 5 of those policies are in draft mode, meaning they're not published to the system. I'm working on them. Something needs to be done. Maybe I need to approve them, right? So maybe they're sitting out there and I still need to approve them. If I click, I can actually link to it, and it'll give me the details of what those 5 are and what's still outstanding on them. Maybe I just have to add information to it. So it's a little snapshot, right, of the information. Another one, nice little snapshot of information is really the info sources. And those, we didn't really go into it, I'll explain as we go through this, but the info source is really that connection, that repository connection. So that a single connection to SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013, shared drive, to FileNet, to document them. Each one of those would be an info source. And right now we're connected to 8 of them, and it gives you little stats about what's declared, what's not declared, what's on legal hold. So a little snapshot into the world. Next piece is, well, I guess I got my answer about do I have anything. So these are tasks that are sitting out there for me to do something with. The first one of them, right, corporate policies, waiting for your approval. Well, there goes that out the window, right? It's not waiting on me to do anything. So I will not, it's obviously something else that's sitting out there. And then the last part of this is, and probably the most important, is there are over 50 assets sitting out there that are waiting for disposal of some type and waiting for my approval that I need to get to verify whatever it happens to be. And then the last one is really the last set of items I've worked with. So it's just a quick reference, and I can sort on these, and I can expand this to add fields here. Why this is important? Well, the most simple one is I might, as a records management, know that I've got 110 policies, but it says only 58 have been defined to my system. So that alone would be an issue. But there's a couple of things. So now let's get into the demo itself. So the first part is the policies, right? So I've talked a lot about the policies. Let me show you. This is pretty simple the way it works. And you set up. I can go out here. I can expand this. I can select a file to look, select a policy to look at, and it allows me to look through this, right? So I can expand these, look at these. I can modify them, create new policies from here. I can edit a policy that exists. I can create a new version of a policy. I can look at, if I had multiple versions, I could actually go out and pick a different version. If there was multiple versions here, I could actually look at that. So what I'm interested in is, we keep talking about contracts, right? So let's make my life easier since I don't know where contracts is located. So I'll go out and do a search, and, well, contracts are right here. So I can click on that. And what it allows me to do now is to take a look at it. So the first thing I know is it's under legal, right? So this contract's under legal. It's contracts and agreements. And here's some information about it, some basic information about it. So first part about it is the jurisdiction, right? Effective date. But really the important pieces here as I go through this are, I can look out there and see, well, how many catalogs have been built against it? How many items are out there? What's being processed? Is this used in more than a single file plan? You know, most organizations will have a single file plan, but we have a large number of our customers that have multiple jurisdictions. So they'll have a dozen file plans or half a dozen file plans, a file plan sitting out here, not only against one jurisdiction, but maybe multiple jurisdictions on it. This just happens to be single file plan in a single jurisdiction. So that's another benefit of the solution itself, having the multiple jurisdictions and the ability to build out file plans based on the needs of your end users. Just pausing so everybody can catch up. So the next part of this, right, so we've gone over policies a little bit. Really the next part of this is the info sources themselves. And the info sources are basically those repositories you want to go against. So you would build out a single info source for each repository you want to go against. So whatever that environment is, whether it's SharePoint, as you can see here, whether it's Box or Google Drive, each unique repository would have it connected to it. Once these connectors are built out, the next phase of this is the cataloger, right? You would build out a cataloger. And a cataloger, what that allows you to do is that once the repository is built, now I can identify the content I want to go against. So what we'll do is we'll create a couple quick ones here. So I know the first thing I was going against was my shared drives, right? So we'll just do a shared drive cataloger, and we'll do contracts, I don't know, vendor, right? What it allows you to do now is I've typed in the cataloger. Now I can go and select that info source. And if you remember, the info source is basically that connection to that repository. So right now we're doing shared drives. I'll go against the shared drive I've built out. And from shared drive, let me go select the content. So it was test data that I built out, and then demo, and then vendor contracts vendor. Okay, so I've built that out. So pretty simple, straightforward, right? I've named the contract, I've named the cataloger itself. From that point, I've selected the content or contents I want to go against. Last part of it is, what policy do I apply against that? So now I identified that policy. So I know before from what we looked at the policy, legal, it's contracts, and this is just so I understand, it's just a little reference for it, that it is the one I want to go through. It's 6 years. I go down here. Now, these are things I'll touch on briefly. I'm not going to go into today a little bit, but I'll touch on it very briefly. When you process the cataloger, you can set it up. Right now, everything's going to go out there unprotected, meaning it's just a file, get catalog in the system. But there are situations that I might want to protect an asset. And that asset might need to be moved to another repository, or I might need to make a copy. For some systems like a Google Drive, where locking down the content in place is difficult, you might want to make a copy and put it in that golden copy, or you might just want to make it as a standard practice when I go against repository A, that you can go out there and say, okay, now move this to, Google Vault. No matter what's out there, move it and protect that asset. And the last part is when I schedule it, right? So I can schedule now. Right down here, I can set up a schedule. So right now it's done per hour. I can set this up based on scheduling any way I want. So right now, I've created a cataloger. It's basic information. It's been created in the system. And now let me go back up. And I've created SharePoint. I've created shared drive. Now let me create SharePoint. So I'll go out here, the same thing, and I'll do SharePoint. Do vendor docs. My typing slow, and I go out and I'll select the SharePoint 2010, and obviously you can see this is a pretty quick process. If you could type faster than I can, you can do it faster than I can. And this again is using our native ability, native cataloger to go out and access information. So I've identified the content I want to go against. I'll go against the policies, contracts, and agreements, the same thing. And I'll just go out and create the catalog itself. And what's happened now is once those catalogers get built out, they'll go out, the initial time you build them, they'll go out, they're scheduled on the system, they'll go out, access when you build them the first time through, they are triggered automatically. So they'll go out immediately, they'll go out and process that content, catalog whatever needs to be cataloged and put it against the policies that it's going against. And then what you can do is a couple of different things here. I can go inventory and look at content. I can do a couple of different things here. So the first thing I normally would do is I can go back. Now we have so many records out here, it wouldn't matter, but I can go back and look at the last items, right? These are the last items access. Well, you can see all that content is out there, right? There are 2 from SharePoint and 2 from shared drives. Just a quick way, right? Another way I can do it is I can go here and just type in ACME, and I know all the documents had ACME in them. And from this viewpoint, now I can do a couple things, right? I can look at it. It'll tell me, what the file was associated with it. Are there multiple files associated with it? I can do a couple different things. I can put legal holds here, but it gives me information about what I want to do, right? And I can even change this view, right? If I wanted to change, add a status to this and maybe take away the file plan, I can do it at this point. And it'll just change that view of it. So it allows you now to go out and look at the information you have and get a better snapshot of that from our viewpoint, right? So so you've quickly seen that I've added 2 different catalogers, right? I've gone against SharePoint 2010 and a shared drive directory, gone out, taken content from there and put it in the system. And now in a matter of a couple of minutes, I was able to, I can add a policy and I can define 2 catalogers, an info source and 2 catalogers, and go out there and process content. That's one of the things that we keep stressing about, how we can now take those retention schedules sitting out there and quickly put them online, right? Quickly put them in the system. And once you have those policies built out, define the info source, define the catalogers, and start actually implementing and putting an IG solution in place immediately, not waiting to go out and get IT to build a connector and build connections to things and having multiple retention schedules for different repositories, but instead a single. So with that said, that's really, from a demo standpoint, that was really the focus of our demo for today. But what I wanted to show, and somebody that brought up a question about dashboards in general, right? So one dashboard in general I wanted to point out. So we, with the GlassIG solution, you have a number of different KPIs that you have. One KPI in particular is the inventory stats, right? And it's what you've processed. And why this is valuable, and this is really something that we're seeing more and more people use when they've implemented our solution, is this chart itself. It tells you not only the repositories, but within those repositories, what you've got, right? So I can do simple things like I can drill into it and they'll change all the stats, right? It'll change the stats I'm going against. Or so it allows me now to look at not only what inventory is sitting out, but maybe when it was created, if something is being held to almost retention, should have been deleted off the system already, yet it's not. Something that should be disposed of, how many have been created. So it's a nice little snapshot from a business standpoint of what your world looks like. And it allows you to, same thing, right? Not just items, but I can look at this information quarterly, monthly, by the year, whatever I want. So it's that whole ability to now work with information and know exactly what it's doing, what story it's telling. And if I go back up here to the repositories, it's the same thing. So this is just that one view of it, right? That one view of the system, what it allows you to do is now not only process the information, but now report back to management or whoever needs the information to know what's going on. And this is just one sample of the different dashboards that we do provide as part of the GlassIG solution. So as I said, we're finishing a little early. So first one, can you show? Okay, yes. So first one was, I'll show. Let's see this. Dun, dun, dun. So the first one, can I go back and show with SharePoint and Shared Drive what it looks like now? So within the system itself, you can see if something is immutable. So you can actually go out now and look within the SharePoint system itself, and I have Authenticate in. Let's see. So what this is going to show us basically is I go out and look at it. I can go out and select right-click and see something. Is it actually governed by Glass? And if it is, give me some details on it. Well, this is the same thing as the wizard, right? I talked a little bit about how we get information in. Well, same thing. It's that wizard. So I can now, I can actually unclassify something here and reclassify it. So if I chose to, I can unclassify content and reclassify as another category, or go out there and classify. You have that ability when you're processing it. This is just the SharePoint, and then the shared drive. Give me 1 second. And I just lost all my connections. Sorry about this. I just lost my. I'm just restarting. So there's another question as I'm just restarting this for a second. There was another question about, can you make the system immutable? Yes. Items, depending on the repository, once they're declared to the system, can be immutable. And depending on, if anybody needs, I can do a follow-up with you on what repositories and what that, sorry about this, I'm just connecting up to the system again. And so, again, this is the same thing. When I go out here, you can see how files change. So before you saw the file itself, and now you can see that it is now managed by Glass. And you can go through and basically I can see compliance details. Or again, we have the same thing where we can use a wizard on the SharePoint side of the world. We can use wizard here, also define content or send to a preservation center, whatever you wanted to do with on a one-off basis. Let's see what other questions are out there. I think that is all the questions at this point. And then I'll just show you one more thing. So if you go out here from the SharePoint, from the shared drive system, if I had something immutable, you'd see out here the lock on it. So one file, these files are declared in the system and they're immutable. Files I put out there are cataloged into the system, and while we manage them and track them, they're not immutable at that point. So I hope that clears that one up, that question. And then let's see. Can you show more dashboards? Yes, I can. Actually, what I can do is, if you're interested, if you want to just reach out to us, we can set up a separate demo to show you some dashboards. Maybe the last one I'll show, since I do like dashboards so much, is a little bit about infonomics. So let's see. So one of the things, and we have a white paper out there, it's a very good white paper on this, but it allows you to now, the whole concept of putting value to an asset. So I know this is not part of the regular webinar, but somebody did have a question, so I'm just going to help them out briefly. So it allows you now to use our dashboard, the content you're processing, all that information that's sitting out there now that you've gathered by cataloging, declaring information, and now based on the value of an asset, know something more about it, right? So that's the first thing to get over is every asset does have value, right? All content that sits out on the system, whether it's out there for a day or a year or disposed of or not disposed of, has value to a corporation. What this dashboard allows you to do, and there's a white paper that goes in a lot of detail that's well worth downloading and reading, is how do you look at that information? And this is part of it, right? This is that part of that snapshot of not just the information sitting out there and what's sitting out there, that volume, but what's the value to the organization? And it allows you now to not only see what's there, but maybe how information is trending. So it's just a different view of it, a different a look into the information, and we have a lot of different ways. But we've talked about the SharePoint itself, right? Well, maybe you want to see the value of content within SharePoint itself, what information is sitting out there. So this dashboard allows you to do a lot, not only look at the information sitting out there, but sort of that what if type of scenario, show the trend, where you're trending, where you're not trending on information, where components really exist. So a lot of different ways this tool can be used. particularly this one dashboard, but from an infonomics standpoint, it allows you to report on and understand the value of the assets within an organization. So just a little extra information for, I know a couple people had some questions about additional dashboards. This happens to be one that I do show a lot, that people have a lot of interest in. And as I said, there's a whole series of white papers on our website, one in particular, Infonomics, that has a lot of details on it, and we'd be willing to follow up with anybody who needs to. In May, I believe, and I'm sure somebody's going to behind the scenes yell at me, there's a presentation on dashboards. So there'll be a webinar on dashboards that will go into details on not only the 14 dashboards we have, but other things you can do with that content, you know, extracting whatever you want to do with it to actually report more in your system. Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any more questions. I'm giving everybody 10 minutes of the day back. And again, the next webinar we have is April 4th, data privacy. You'll be seeing emails sent out about that. And if you have any questions or comments, you can get back. My email in particular is kevin.dowd@glasig.com. Look forward to the feedback, and we will be announcing the next presentation shortly. And the last piece here that I want to leave everybody with is, if you can today, if you have time, go out. You can create an account, and what we can do is, if you just contact us, I can walk you through the process a little bit more of how to build, how to sign up, which is very quick, very easily, and then I'll walk you through the system a little bit of it to help you out. So again, my name is Kevin Dowd. I'm glad you were able to attend the webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Have a great day.